Jamal was 38 years old, a high school librarian in Savannah, Georgia, with a salary of $32,450 a year. He was a quiet man, a man of routines and worn paperbacks, a man whose greatest wealth was the scent of old books and the sound of his daughter's laughter, and he was sitting at a dinner table that felt like a courtroom, with his wife's family as judge, jury, and executioner. The table was a 10-foot slab of polished mahogany in the formal dining room of their Ardsley Park estate, a $2.5 million monument to old money and older prejudices. A $15,000 chandelier dripped crystal light onto plates of bone china, each piece costing more than Jamal's monthly car payment for his 2012 Toyota Camry. His father-in-law, Marcus Thorne, a man whose posture was as rigid as his portfolio, had just finished a toast. He'd raised a glass of $900 a bottle Chateau Margaux to his own success, to the family's legacy, to the impenetrable fortress of their wealth. Then, his cold eyes landed on Jamal. "Of course," Marcus began, his voice a low growl of condescension, "we must also acknowledge those who join our family, those who aspire." He let the word hang in the air, thick and suffocating. Jamal's wife, Raven, seated beside him, shifted in her chair. She didn't look at him. She was admiring her new diamond bracelet, a $12,000 gift from her father, that she'd casually mentioned was for surviving another tax season. Marcus continued, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It takes a certain kind of man to appreciate this life, a man of vision, a man of means." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was a physical thing, pressing down on Jamal's shoulders. He looked directly at Jamal, a glint of pure disdain in his eyes. "A $30,000 man has no business at this table." The words hit Jamal not with a bang, but with a quiet, sickening thud. The air left his lungs. He could feel the eyes of Raven's mother, Eleanor, and her brother Preston on him. They weren't angry or embarrassed. They were amused. It was a spectator sport for them, the ritual humiliation of the poor relation. He looked at Raven, his wife of 10 years, the mother of his child. She was staring intently at the floral centerpiece, her jaw tight, a faint blush of shame on her cheeks. But the shame wasn't for her father's cruelty. It was for him, for his very existence in her perfect, expensive world. He felt a chasm open up beside him, a vast, dark space between his simple life and theirs, and he knew in that moment that he was utterly, hopelessly alone. He had no idea just how deep that chasm truly was, or that he was about to be handed the power to close it forever. What do you do when the people who are supposed to love you make it clear they only value what you can provide? And what happens when they have no idea what you're truly worth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and stick around to see how a quiet librarian teaches a wealthy family the real meaning of power. Their life together had been built on a facade of domestic normalcy, a carefully curated play where everyone knew their roles. Jamal was the humble, loving husband, and Raven was the beautiful, patient wife who had married beneath her station for love. The set was a modest 3-bedroom bungalow in Cuyler, Brownsville, a neighborhood rich in history but modest in property value. The house, with its creaky porch swing and a mortgage that ate up a third of Jamal's take-home pay, was their stage. Mornings were a tableau of contrasts. At 6:15 a.m., Jamal would be in the kitchen, the air smelling of coffee from his $40 Mr. Coffee machine. He'd pack a lunch for their 8-year-old daughter, Amari, a turkey sandwich, an apple, a small bag of carrots, and a note written on a napkin. It was a lunch that cost about $3.50 to assemble. Then he'd pack his own, leftovers from the night before in a stained Tupperware container. As he worked, Raven would drift in, dressed in a $400 silk robe, scrolling through her phone. "Did you see the new Celine bag?" she'd ask, not looking up from the glowing screen. It's only 3,000. I think I deserve a little treat. Jamal would just nod, sealing Amari's lunch bag. Maybe we can look at the budget this weekend. The budget, she would scoff, a soft, dismissive sound. Jamal, your budget is why we can't have nice things. She'd pour herself a coffee, adding a splash of a $15 organic oat milk, then leave the mug on the counter for him to wash. Their vehicles told the same story. His was the 2012 Toyota Camry, its odometer proudly displaying 187,000 miles. He did the oil changes himself to save the $80 fee. Hers was a brand new Lexus RX 350, a $65,000 SUV her parents had helped them with, which meant they'd paid for it in full and held the title as a form of silent leverage. When they drove anywhere together, they took the Lexus. I can't be seen in that old thing, she'd say of his Camry. It's embarrassing. The most telling details were in the small, everyday acts. Jamal's love for his daughter was an act of service. He was the one who sat with her for an hour every morning, patiently working coconut oil through her beautiful, coily hair, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he wove it into intricate braids, securing them with the colorful beads she loved. The sound of the beads clicking together as she ran was the soundtrack of his joy. He was the one who read to her every night, his voice bringing dragons and distant galaxies into her small bedroom. His favorite watch was an $89 Timex, a gift from his late grandmother. Raven's was a $7,000 Cartier tank, a birthday present from him, purchased with a full year of painful, dedicated saving from his meager salary. She rarely wore it, preferring the newer, flashier pieces her parents gave her. The facade was that Raven tolerated his financial limitations because of his good heart. She would say things to her friends, loud enough for him to overhear. Jamal is just so pure. He doesn't care about material things. It was framed as a virtue, but it was delivered like an apology. What he didn't know was that this narrative was her cover. While he was carefully budgeting for a $150 grocery bill, she was quietly, methodically bleeding their shared life dry, one secret transaction at a time. The domestic normalcy wasn't just a play, it was a distraction, and he was the only one in the audience who didn't know the real story. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow erosion, a series of paper cuts that bled him of his dignity until he was numb. The cruelty escalated, scene by scene, each one a little bolder, a little more dismissive, as if they were testing the limits of his tolerance. The first major test came on Amari's 8th birthday. For 6 months, Jamal had set aside $20 from every paycheck, hiding it in an old shoebox. He'd watched his daughter stare at the night sky, her deep brown eyes full of wonder, and knew exactly what she wanted. He bought her a Celestron telescope, a good one for a beginner, costing him $152.99. He spent the night before her birthday assembling it, his heart swelling with anticipation. He imagined her face when she saw it, the gasp of delight, the nights they would spend on the back porch charting the constellations. On the morning of her birthday, he and Amari were on the floor, carefully unwrapping his gift. Her eyes were wide. "For me, Daddy? A real telescope?" "A real one," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So you can see Saturn's rings." Just then the front door opened without a knock. It was Marcus and Eleanor. They swept into the small living room, filling it with the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. Eleanor was carrying a large, glossy envelope. "Happy birthday, my darling," Eleanor cooed, ignoring Jamal completely and handing the envelope to Amari. Amari opened it. Inside was a brochure for a prestigious equestrian academy and a gift certificate. "What is it, Grandma?" "It's a full year of pony riding lessons, sweetie," Marcus announced, booming. Private instruction. It's a $3,000 package. You'll be a champion in no time. Amari looked at the glossy photos of girls in riding helmets, then back at the simple black telescope sitting on the floor. A child's loyalty is a fragile thing. Jamal saw the conflict in her eyes. He felt his own gift shrink, becoming small and cheap under the weight of their extravagance. Raven walked in, smiling. She kissed her father's cheek. "Oh, Daddy, that's perfect. She'll love it." Then she glanced at the telescope. "That's sweet, Jamal. It's nice you tried." She said it in front of everyone. You tried. As if his months of saving, his thoughtful planning, were nothing more than a child's clumsy effort. The words hung in the air, another layer of public humiliation. He just smiled weakly and helped Amari put the telescope in its box, where it would gather dust in her closet. A few weeks later, the check engine light on his Camry came on. The mechanic at the local Midas quoted him $450 for a new alternator. It was a huge expense, one that would require him to dip into their joint savings account, a small fund he meticulously fed with $50 a month. That evening, at 9:23 p.m., after Raven and Amari were asleep, he logged into their online banking portal. The savings account, which should have had around $1,800, had only $213. His heart hammered against his ribs. He clicked on the transaction history. For the past 18 months, there had been a steady stream of transfers, always on the 28th of the month. Amounts varied: $500, $800. One was for $1,500. They were all going to another account, one he didn't recognize. The total was staggering. Over $42,000 was gone. The next morning, his hands were trembling as he held his coffee mug. He waited until Amari had left for school. "Raven," he began, his voice quiet. "I was looking at the savings account. There's a lot of money missing." She didn't even look up from her iPad. "Oh, that. It's for a family investment thing. Daddy is handling it." "An investment? $42,000? Why didn't you tell me?" She finally looked at him, her eyes cold and impatient. "Tell you what, Jamal? That we're trying to build actual wealth? It's complicated financial strategy. Honestly, you wouldn't understand it. It involves dividends and capital gains, not clipping coupons." Her tone was laced with such profound condescension it felt like a slap. "Just leave the important things to us, okay? Stick to your books." She turned back to her screen, dismissing him and his concern in a single, brutal gesture. He stood in his own kitchen, a ghost in his own life, realizing that the woman he had married viewed him as little more than a simple-minded child, incapable of understanding the world she truly inhabited. He had no idea how right she was. They had no idea what was coming. The final crushing blow came at her parents' 40th wedding anniversary party. It was held at their Ardsley Park estate, a sprawling mansion that seemed to mock his tiny bungalow. The gardens were professionally lit. A string quartet played softly near a marble fountain, and waiters in crisp white jackets circulated with trays of champagne and caviar. Jamal felt like an imposter in his best and only suit, a 7-year-old Joseph A. Banks suit that had cost him $450. Raven wore a shimmering silver gown that cost $4,000, a fact she mentioned to 3 different people. She barely spoke to him all night. Preferring to glide through the crowd of bankers, surgeons, and heiresses, her laughter bright and brittle. Toward the end of the evening, Marcus gathered everyone for a toast. After a long, self-congratulatory speech, he opened the floor. Raven's brother gave a sycophantic tribute. Her mother shed a few theatrical tears. Then, a silence fell. Jamal, feeling a desperate need to reclaim some small piece of his manhood, to show he belonged, raised his glass. "I'd just like to say a few words," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. The crowd turned to look at him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and pity. To Marcus and Eleanor, 40 years is an incredible milestone. It's a testament to building something that lasts. He believed in that. He believed in legacy, in things that endured. He was about to say more, to speak from the heart about family, when Marcus cut him off with a loud, dismissive laugh. He walked over to Jamal and put a heavy hand on his shoulder, a gesture that was meant to look friendly, but felt like an arrest. "Isn't he something?" Marcus said to the assembled guests, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "My son-in-law, the librarian, always has a nice sentiment. Sentiments, however, don't pay the bills." He squeezed Jamal's shoulder, hard. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. "You want to talk about building something that lasts? A $30,000 man has no business at this table. Now go get my wife another glass of champagne." The laughter was scattered at first. Then it grew. It was polite, country club laughter, but it was laughter all the same. Raven stood 10 feet away, her back to him, deep in conversation with a woman wearing a necklace that could have paid off his mortgage. She heard. He knew she heard. She didn't flinch. She didn't defend him. She simply let him stand there, stripped bare and humiliated in a room full of people who saw him as nothing more than a joke. In that moment, something inside him broke, or maybe it was forged. He quietly walked to the bar, got the champagne, and handed it to Eleanor. He smiled a small, empty smile. He was done trying. He was done hoping. He was just waiting. He just didn't know what for. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon at 4:08 p.m. It was a typically quiet time at the school library, the lull between the last bell and the start of after-school programs. The air was warm and still, smelling of aging paper and floor polish. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, illuminating swirling dust motes in its golden shafts. Jamal was in his small, windowless office, a space he privately called his quiet room, a name Amari had given it. It was a cramped but comforting sanctuary, lined floor to ceiling with books he'd rescued from the discard pile. His desk was a sturdy, scarred oak piece from the 1950s, a relic from the school's early days. He was mending the spine of a worn copy of Their Eyes Were Watching God with archival tape, when his personal cell phone, a 5-year-old Samsung Galaxy, with a cracked screen, buzzed on the desk. The caller ID showed a number from downtown Savannah with a name he didn't recognize. Davies and Finch, LLP. Probably a wrong number. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it buzzed again. Same number, curiosity piqued. He answered. "Is this Jamal Peters?" a man's voice asked. It was a calm, formal voice, the kind that was used to being listened to. "This is he," Jamal replied. "Mr. Peters, my name is Arthur Davies. I'm an estate attorney with Davies and Finch. I'm calling on behalf of the estate of your late grandmother, Evelyn Peters." Jamal's heart gave a little jolt. His grandmother Evelyn had passed away 2 years ago. She was a formidable woman, a retired nurse who had lived a frugal, quiet life in a small house just outside the city. She smelled of cinnamon and rose water and had hands that were perpetually busy, either gardening, knitting, or holding a book. She was the one who had instilled in him his love of reading. "My grandmother? Is something wrong?" "No, not at all," Mr. Davies said. "Quite the opposite. I'm calling because the mandatory 2-year quiet period for her testamentary trust has just concluded. We need to schedule a meeting with you to discuss the distribution." Jamal was confused. "A trust? I think there's a mistake. My grandmother lived on her pension. There wasn't much left after the funeral expenses. My wife and I actually helped cover some of that." He remembered the condescending look Raven had given him when he'd written that $1,500 check. There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by the faint rustle of paper. "Mr. Peters," the attorney said, his voice now holding a note of gentle gravity, "your grandmother was a very discreet woman. Her husband, your grandfather, made some incredibly astute investments in the 1960s. She lived modestly, but her assets were quite substantial." Jamal leaned forward, his hand gripping the edge of the old oak desk. The grain of the wood felt solid and real beneath his trembling fingers. "Substantial? What does that mean?" "The current value of the Evelyn Peters Trust, as of the market close yesterday, is $2,147,352.18. The room went silent. The only sound was the frantic thumping of his own heart. $2 million. The number was abstract, impossible. It was a figure from a movie, not from his life. "But the most important detail, Mr. Peters," the attorney continued, pulling Jamal from his daze, "is the structure of the trust. Your grandmother was a very wise woman. She named you the sole beneficiary, but more than that, she named you the sole trustee." "Trustee? What does that mean?" "It means you have complete and total discretionary power over the funds. You decide how and when they are distributed. You control everything." Mr. Davies cleared his throat. "She included a personal letter with the trust documents, which I will give you when we meet. But she made her intentions very clear in the legal language. The trust was designed, and I'm quoting here, to provide for the well-being and security of my beloved grandson, Jamal Peters, and to be used at his sole discretion, shielding him from avarice and opportunism." Avarice and opportunism. The word struck him like a physical blow. His grandmother had seen it. All those years ago, during their brief, polite visits, she had seen the hungry look in Raven's eyes. She had seen the predatory dismissal in Marcus and Eleanor's smiles. She hadn't just left him money. She had left him a shield, a weapon. He hung up the phone, his hand shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He stared at the wall, at the rows and rows of books, his quiet companions. For 10 years he had been made to feel small, worthless, and poor. He had been a $30,000 man at a millionaire's table, and now, in the space of a single 4-minute phone call, the entire world had shifted on its axis. He was still a librarian. He was still a quiet man, but he was no longer poor, and he was no longer powerless. A slow, cold calm washed over him. The humiliation was over. The accounting was about to begin. Knowledge without action is just a burden. Jamal now carried the weight of a $2 million secret, and the hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. He had to become a better actor than Raven had ever been, feigning ignorance while his mind raced with strategy. The world was a different color now, every interaction filtered through the lens of his newfound power. That very evening was the first test. He got home from the library at 6:15 p.m., the scent of roasted chicken from Raven's meal delivery service filling their small bungalow. She was on the sofa, scrolling through an online boutique on her laptop. Amari was at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she drew a picture with her box of Crayola crayons. "Hey, honey," Raven said, not looking up. "My parents' gala is in 2 weeks. I need a new dress. There's a stunning one on Net-a-Porter, but it's $800. Think you can move some money around?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand wrapped in the thin tissue of politeness. A week ago, this would have sparked a tense, circular argument about their budget, ending with him feeling guilty and inadequate. Tonight, he felt a strange sense of calm, almost detachment. He walked over and kissed the top of her head. "An $800 dress, huh? Let me take a look at our finances this weekend. I'm sure I can figure something out." She looked up, surprised by his easy compliance. Really? That's it? You deserve to look beautiful, he said, the words feeling foreign and calculated in his mouth. He was gathering evidence, not of her spending but of her character. Every casual demand was another exhibit for a trial no one else knew was happening. Amari piped up from the table. "Daddy, look." She held up her drawing. It showed a tall, smiling man with brown skin and neat black hair standing in a room full of bookshelves. At the bottom, in her careful, blocky printing, she had written, "My daddy's quiet room." His heart ached with love. He knelt beside her. "This is the best drawing you've ever made." This was real. This was his true north. The next day, a Saturday, his mother-in-law called. "Jamal, dear." Eleanor's voice oozed false sweetness. "I need a favor. Marcus and I are having some old Persian rugs cleaned, and the company won't pick up. They're far too heavy for me. Could you be a dear and run them over to the cleaners on Abercorn Street for us? We'll be out all day." It was a servant's task, a clear power play to remind him of his place. The old Jamal would have bristled, then reluctantly agreed. The new Jamal saw an opportunity. "Of course, Eleanor. Happy to help. I can swing by in an hour." He drove his Camry to the Ardsley Park estate. The massive front door was unlocked as promised. The two rugs, each weighing at least 100 pounds, were rolled up in the grand foyer. As he struggled to lift the first one, he let his eyes wander. He saw the casual opulence with a forensic clarity. A half-eaten plate of expensive cheeses and fruits left on a side table to rot. A new unopened $2,000 espresso machine sitting on the kitchen counter, still in its box, likely an impulse buy. An electricity bill for over $900 for the previous month lying on the marble island. He saw not wealth, but waste. A profound, almost spiritual carelessness. This was the avarice his grandmother had warned him about. The final piece of the puzzle arrived a few days later. Raven tossed a thick, cream-colored envelope onto the kitchen counter. It was embossed with the Thorne Family Foundation crest. "Here's the official invitation to the gala," she said. "It's a big one this year. Daddy is making some huge announcement about a new real estate venture. He's expecting all the big donors to pledge." She looked him up and down, a flicker of familiar disappointment in her eyes. "Please, just try to look presentable. Borrow a suit if you have to. Just don't embarrass me." He picked up the heavy invitation. The stage was set. Her father was planning a grand performance to solicit money. Jamal decided he would give a performance of his own. "I won't," he said, his voice a mask of placid agreement. She had made a critical mistake. They all had. They thought his silence was weakness. They had no idea it was strategy. They mistook his patience for acceptance. They had no idea it was the calm before a perfectly calculated storm. The following Monday, Jamal took a personal day. Telling the school he had a doctor's appointment, his real appointment was at 10 a.m. in a glass tower on Broughton Street, in the hushed, wood-paneled offices of Davies and Finch. Arthur Davies was an older black man with a kind, intelligent face and a presence that radiated calm authority. He wore a simple, elegant suit that probably cost more than Jamal's car, but he carried himself with an air of quiet service, not arrogance. "Mr. Peters, thank you for coming in," he said, shaking Jamal's hand firmly. "Please, have a seat." The conference room overlooked the Savannah River. For a moment, Jamal just stared out the window, watching a container ship glide silently toward the sea. It felt like his own life, a large, heavy thing that was finally beginning to move. Mr. Davies laid a thick, leather-bound portfolio on the table. "This is the complete trust document, along with your grandmother's personal effects from her safe deposit box." He opened the portfolio. The first page was a summary of assets. Jamal stared at the number again. $2,147,352.18. It was real. "Let's walk through the key provisions," Mr. Davies said. For the next hour, he patiently explained the legal architecture of the trust. He read key phrases aloud, his voice giving them a weight Jamal had not fully appreciated over the phone. Sole and absolute discretion, without the consent or approval of any other person. To be protected from claims of spousal or creditor attachment. Your grandmother was very thorough. She was protecting you, Jamal. Then he pushed a slim, sealed envelope across the table. "And this is her letter." Jamal's hands trembled as he opened it. The handwriting was his grandmother's, a familiar, spidery script. "My dearest Jamal, if you are reading this, then I am with the ancestors, and you are a wealthy man. I pray you are still a good one. I never like to show my money. Your grandfather worked hard for it, and I saw what it did to people. It can make them lazy, or it can make them cruel. I have watched the family you married into. They are the cruel kind. They see people as tools or obstacles. I saw how they looked at you, my gentle, book-loving boy. They think you are weak because you are kind. They are wrong. Kindness is a different kind of strength. This money is a tool. Use it to build, not to break. Use it to protect yourself. Use it to create a life of purpose, not a life of luxury. Your worth was never in a bank account, Jamal. It was always in your heart. Don't let them ever make you forget that. All my love, Grandma Evelyn." A single tear escaped his eye and splashed onto the page. He carefully folded the letter and put it in his pocket. It felt heavier than the portfolio. "Now," Mr. Davies said, his tone shifting from gentle to professional, "you mentioned your wife has been making unauthorized transfers. On my advice, what did you find?" Jamal slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed copies of their joint bank account statements for the past 2 years, with every transfer to the secret account highlighted in yellow. The total at the bottom was circled in red, $42,850. He also included a copy of a credit report he had pulled on himself, which had revealed a high-limit credit card under Raven's name, using his social security number as a co-signer without his knowledge. The balance was $28,300, filled with charges from Gucci, Louis Vuitton, and weekend trips to Charleston he knew nothing about. Mr. Davies reviewed the documents, his expression grim. "This is financial infidelity. It's a clear breach of fiduciary duty within a marriage. In a divorce proceeding, this would be viewed very harshly by a judge." Divorce? The word hung in the air. Jamal had been avoiding it, but seeing the cold, hard proof of Raven's deceit made the path clear. It wasn't just her family's snobbery. It was a calculated, long-term betrayal by his own wife. "Her family is hosting a large charity gala in 2 weeks, Jamal said, his voice steady and clear. "Her father is making a big announcement. The entire elite of Savannah will be there." A slow smile spread across Arthur Davies's face. He understood immediately. The most effective statements are public ones. "I want you there," Jamal said, "as my legal counsel." "It would be my distinct honor," the attorney replied. They spent the next hour outlining the plan. Mr. Davies would draft the divorce papers. A process server would be hired. They coordinated the timing down to the minute. Jamal would let Marcus have his moment on stage. And then he would take his own. He wasn't just claiming his inheritance. He was reclaiming his name. The quiet librarian was about to teach a master class in consequences. The night of the Thorne Family Foundation Gala arrived under a canopy of stars, the Savannah air thick with the scent of jasmine and money. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Perry Lane Hotel, a space designed to communicate effortless power. Towering floral arrangements, costing at least $20,000, stood like sentinels. A jazz trio played softly in the corner, The clinking of glasses and the low hum of self-important conversation filled the room. Jamal stood near the entrance, a silent observer in a sea of sharks. He wore a new suit, but it was not a flashy one. It was a perfectly tailored, charcoal gray suit from a local haberdashery, costing a modest $750. It was the first significant purchase he had made with his own money, and it felt like armor. Beside him, Arthur Davies looked perfectly at home in a classic black tuxedo, his calm demeanor a reassuring anchor. Raven appeared at his side, a vision in a deep crimson gown that had cost $3,200. She glittered with diamonds, her mother's earrings, her father's bracelet. "There you are," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "You actually look nice. Just remember what I said. Stay in the background. Don't talk to anyone important. And please don't try to make any toasts." "I wouldn't dream of it," Jamal said, his voice level. The dramatic irony was so thick he could taste it. He watched her move through the room, a queen in her court. He saw her parents, Marcus and Eleanor, holding court near the stage. Marcus was in a $5,000 Tom Ford tuxedo, his chest puffed out with pride. Eleanor was draped in a $10,000 Chanel gown, her face a mask of smug satisfaction. They were at the absolute pinnacle of their world, surrounded by people who feared or envied them. They had no idea their world was about to be turned upside down. At 9 p.m. sharp, Marcus tapped a glass for attention and ascended the small stage. The room fell silent. A spotlight found him, and he beamed, soaking in the adoration. "Friends, colleagues, pillars of our community," he began. "Thank you for joining us. Tonight we celebrate not just philanthropy, but legacy. We celebrate the building of things that last, things that echo through generations." He spoke for 10 minutes, a long, rambling ode to himself, disguised as a speech about charity. Jamal felt his grandmother's letter in his pocket, a warm, solid weight against his chest. Finally, Marcus arrived at his grand finale. And it is in that spirit of building that I am thrilled to announce the Thorn Real Estate Group's newest venture, a $500 million luxury condominium project on the waterfront, a project that will redefine the Savannah skyline. A wave of enthusiastic applause swept the room. Marcus raised his hands, basking in it. "Pledge cards are on your tables," he shouted over the noise. "We build together." This was the moment. As the applause began to die down, Jamal walked calmly from the back of the room toward the stage. A few people turned to look, confused. Raven saw him, her eyes widening in horror, a silent "no" forming on her lips. He ignored her. He walked up the 3 short steps and stood next to his father-in-law, taking the second microphone from its stand. Marcus looked at him, his smile faltering, turning into a confused scowl. "Jamal? What in God's name are you doing?" Jamal turned to the silent, watching crowd. "Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamal Peters. I'm Raven's husband." He paused, letting the simple statement settle. "And I, too, would like to talk about legacy." He saw Arthur Davies give him a slight, encouraging nod from the floor. "My grandmother, Evelyn Peters, passed away 2 years ago," Jamal continued, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the sound system. "She was a nurse. She lived in a small house and drove an old car. Most of you would not have considered her a person of importance. You would not have invited her to this table." He glanced at Marcus, whose face was darkening with rage. "But my grandmother, like many in her generation, believed in quiet work and wise investments. She also believed in protecting her family. To that end, she established a trust. That trust, as of 2 weeks ago, is valued at just over $2.1 million. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. The silence was absolute. He could see Raven, her face as white as the tablecloths. Her mother's hand was at her throat. "My grandmother also had a keen eye for character," Jamal said, his gaze sweeping over the Thorne family, "which is why she named me the sole trustee with complete and absolute discretionary power over every single dollar." He turned to Marcus. "You once told me a $30,000 man had no business at your table. My grandmother, it seems, felt the same way about men of your character having any business at hers. As trustee, I have reviewed the potential beneficiaries, and it is my decision. Under the avarice and opportunism clause she so wisely included, that no distribution whatsoever will be made to Marcus or Eleanor Thorne." Marcus sputtered, grabbing for the microphone. "This is slander. It's a lie. Security." Jamal held up a hand, and Arthur Davies stepped forward. "I am Arthur Davies, counsel for the estate. Everything Mr. Peters has stated is legally binding and documented." Jamal then turned his gaze to his wife. His voice dropped, becoming quieter, more personal, yet every word carried through the silent room. "As for my wife, Raven, her share is under review, pending a full, independent audit of the $42,850 she secretly transferred from our joint savings account, and an investigation into the $28,000 credit card debt she opened fraudulently in my name." Raven swayed on her feet, looking as though she might faint. The public humiliation, the very weapon her family had used against him for a decade, was now turned upon them with devastating precision. Jamal placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked out at the sea of stunned faces. He felt nothing. Not triumph, not anger, not joy. Just quiet. He walked down the steps and toward the exit. As he passed his wife, a man in a simple suit stepped forward and handed her a crisp legal envelope. "Raven Peters?" the man asked. She nodded dumbly. "You've been served," the man said, before melting back into the crowd. Jamal didn't look back. He pushed open the grand doors of the ballroom and walked out into the cool Savannah night, a free man. The fallout was not a single explosion, but a cascade of failures, each one a direct consequence of the Thorne family's own actions. Their world, built on the illusion of untouchable prestige, crumbled with breathtaking speed. The first to collapse was Marcus's grand real estate venture. The announcement at the gala was meant to trigger a flood of investment from their wealthy peers. Instead, the story of Jamal's speech became the only thing anyone talked about. The public humiliation was one thing. The implication of financial desperation was another. Whispers turned into rumors. Was the Thorne Empire a house of cards? Were they trying to fleece their friends to stay afloat? Major investors who had verbally committed millions pulled out within 48 hours. The $500 million project was dead before a single shovel of dirt could be turned. Within 3 months, facing a liquidity crisis and unable to secure new loans, Marcus was forced to sell the Ardsley Park estate for $1.9 million. A fire sale price to cover his debts. Eleanor's downfall was social. She was unceremoniously removed from the boards of the 3 prominent charities she lorded over. Her friends stopped returning her calls. The invitations to luncheons and parties dried up. To be publicly exposed as greedy and opportunistic was a social death sentence in their circle. She and Marcus moved into a rented condo on Skidaway Island, a fraction of the size of their old home, their lives shrinking in direct proportion to their influence. Raven's consequences were the most personal and profound. The divorce was swift and brutal. The evidence of her financial infidelity was irrefutable. The $42,850 she had siphoned from their savings and the $28,300 in credit card debt were counted as an advance on her share of the marital assets. After everything was settled, she walked away with almost nothing but her clothes and the $65,000 Lexus, which she had to sell within 6 months to cover her legal fees and rent on a small, one-bedroom apartment downtown. Her voicemails to Jamal in the days after the gala told the story of her unraveling. The first, left at 11:52 p.m. the night of the gala, was pure rage. "How dare you? You have ruined my life, my family. You are a pathetic, vindictive little man." The second, at 9:14 a.m. the next day, was manipulative justification. "Jamal, we need to talk. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Daddy's business? We can fix this. Just tell everyone you were mistaken." The third, a week later, was pleading. "Please, Jamal, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. I can't live like this. My parents, they won't even speak to me. I have no money. Please, you have to help me." The final message a month after that was just a broken sob, a minute of weeping before she hung up. He never responded. Forgiveness was for him, not for her, and he wasn't ready yet. He saved the voicemails, not out of cruelty, but as a reminder of the life he had escaped. Jamal, meanwhile, did not change his life, only its circumstances. He kept his job as the librarian at the high school. He loved his work. He loved the students. He loved the quiet order of the Dewey Decimal System. He resigned from the noise and drama of the Thorne family. He and Amari moved out of the bungalow and into a comfortable, sunny two-bedroom apartment in the historic district, a place with high ceilings and a small balcony garden. He sold the old Camry and bought a safe, reliable $38,000 Subaru Outback. His life became smaller, quieter, and infinitely richer. The money sat in a professionally managed account, a silent testament to his grandmother's wisdom, waiting for him to find its true purpose. He was no longer reacting to the world. He was deliberately, carefully, building his own. 1 year later, the late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over the newly renovated courtyard of George Washington Carver High School. A small, joyful crowd had gathered: students, teachers, parents, and community members from the Cuyler-Brownsville neighborhood. They were there to celebrate the ribbon cutting for the Evelyn Peters Literacy Center. Jamal had used $500,000 of his grandmother's trust to completely overhaul the school's crumbling library. He'd funded new computers, thousands of new books, comfortable reading furniture, and a dedicated after-school tutoring program for struggling readers. It was no longer just a library. It was a vibrant hub of learning and possibility. He'd named it in her honor, a legacy of kindness to counter the Thorne legacy of greed. He stood near the podium, not in a suit but in a simple collared shirt and slacks, feeling more himself than he ever had. The school principal gave a heartfelt speech thanking him for his incredible generosity. The community pastor, an old friend of his grandmother's, spoke about how Evelyn always believed that a book was the quietest and most constant of friends. When it was his turn to speak, Jamal kept it brief. "My grandmother believed that true wealth isn't something you hoard," he said, his voice steady. "It's something you invest in others. This center isn't from me, it's from her. It's for all of you." After he cut the blue ribbon with a pair of oversized scissors, the doors to the new center were opened. The first person to officially check out a book was his daughter, Amari, now 9 years old. Her braids, which he had done that morning, bounced and clicked as she walked proudly to the new automated checkout counter, her library card in hand. She scanned her book, then ran to him, her face alight with a smile that was pure sunshine. She handed him a folded piece of construction paper. "I made this for you, Daddy." He unfolded it. It was a drawing, made with her familiar crayons. It depicted the two of them, their deep brown skin rendered with a loving, careful hand, standing in the middle of the bright, beautiful new library. They were holding hands. Light streamed through the big windows he'd had installed. Beneath the picture, in her neatest printing, were the words, "Daddy's Big Quiet Room." He knelt and hugged her, burying his face in her hair, overwhelmed with a sense of profound peace. He had taken his grandmother's gift and used it to build something real, something that would last. He had created a sanctuary of knowledge for hundreds of children, a place where they could feel seen and valued, a place where their own stories could begin. Wealth isn't a number in a bank account. It's not the car you drive or the label on your suit. True wealth is purpose. It's the quiet satisfaction of using what you have to make the world around you a little bit brighter. It's the freedom to define your own worth, not by the standards of others, but by the love you give and the good you create. Jamal Peters, the $30,000 a year librarian, was the richest man he knew. What do you think is the most important inheritance we can leave for the next generation? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal.